Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Austin, Director of Edinburgh University's Bruce Gallery here on the campus of Edinburgh University. Fred Scruton, a professor of photography here at Edinburgh, suggested that artist Steve Plattner have a solo show here at the Bruce Gallery. When the pandemic closed the gallery last fall, one of our graduate assistants, Rachel Malley, created our first online exhibit, which is called No Place Like Here, and this will be up until next spring, so you have a year to check it out. Tonight's 60-minute event is free and open to the public, thanks to the generosity of the university, the department, the Student Government Association, and Erie Arts and Culture. We are recording this and we'll post the link at our website, brucegallery.info, which is the same location where you can actually log on and click the link to get to see Steve Plattner's show. And now I'm turning the program over to Fred Scruton.
Greetings, and first I want to apologize for this horrendous lighting in the back of the classroom here. This is what I tell my students is basically serial killer lighting, so don't really have much choice at the moment here. So anyway, so Steve was born in Cincinnati, and as an undergraduate, he majored in American Studies and Geography with an emphasis on American documentary photography. Wow. In '75, he received a youth grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to curate a traveling exhibition of photographs from the renowned Farm Security Administration's Depression-era photography project directed by Roy Stryker, which included very iconic pictures that probably everybody would recognize of like Migrant Mother, Dorothea Lange, and work of Walker Evans, Russell Lee. I think Ben Shawn, I think, was one of the FSA photographers, if I remember correctly, painter, photographer. So really primo stuff. And in 1978, he entered the master's program in American Studies at George Washington University, and in the process of writing his thesis on Roy Stryker, again, major figure in the history of documentary, at least American photography, of writing his thesis on Roy Stryker's second major project on the Standard Oil Company in New Jersey. He persuaded, just like Jimmy Morrow apparently, he persuaded Exxon, it was a private joke, he persuaded Exxon to fund a major traveling exhibition of the Standard Oil photographs that opened at the International Center of Photography, ICP, in New York City. The exhibition and accompanying book received wide publicity in the New York Times, Forbes magazine, and was featured on CBS Sunday Morning. So way to go. Steve went on to study Roy Stryker's 50s era Pittsburgh photographic library project. He interviewed the project's photographers and co-authored and edited a book on the project called Witness to the 50s, published in 1999. He has served as the curator of photographs for the Cincinnati Historical Society, and in 1985, he took a position with a commercial printing company in Cincinnati, retiring in 2018. Over the past 15 years, Steve has crisscrossed the country photographing American popular and roadside culture, visionary artists and their environments, monuments, and landscapes. In addition to his current show at the Bruce Gallery, he has a one-person show at the University of Louisville. He had, a one-person show at the University of Louisville in 2012, and has another one-person exhibition opening at the Amarillo Museum of Art in September. And I know Steve because he found my website somehow and just sent me a hello on the contact form, and we've become friends and collaborators, and our interests overlap to a large extent. He's a little bit wider, in his interests. I'm a little narrower, but they overlap a lot, and we've been able to share fun road warrior stories about knowing many of the same people that have similar experiences, and contact information and leads on people and places and so forth. So it's been a great collaboration. So I guess that's it for the introduction. And I just wanted to mention briefly that this exhibition is something like 3 years, right? I think we've been talking about
that.
this. And we were hoping that the Bruce Gallery would be able to move to the library. For people who aren't familiar with it, it's in kind of a basement in one of the art buildings now. And so it would have had a lot more visibility, and there was a big plan to move it over to the library. And then I sort of encouraged Steve to hold off a little bit and have the show there, because I thought it would get, for sure, it would get a lot more traffic. And also, it seems like it'd be very accessible, that people in the rest of the university could relate to, and maybe they wouldn't think that the art department was full of insane lunatics for a change. But anyway, all that fell through, including, I think, the entire plan to move the library due to COVID. So I don't think that, or to move the gallery. So I don't think that's even going to happen. But so now here we are, and all we have is online. So we were going to do this as a little get together with a bunch of students and have a discussion. So anyway, such are the COVID days. So that's all I have to say for an introduction, and turn it over to Steve, and we'll take a look at his work.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Fred. It's good to be here and have the chance to give a little added background and perspective about some of the work and the work in the exhibit specifically. And I'll try my best to stay on point. Call me out on it if I don't. But I just want to thank Fred, though, for suggesting this in the first place, and to Lisa for hosting today. She's a professor of art at Edinburgh, and for enthusiastically supporting this all along the way. It's been great to work with Lisa. Basically, to give you a quick story, I grew up in Cincinnati. My dad worked for Procter & Gamble like everybody else's father did back in the 50s in Cincinnati. And I got a Cub Scout Brownie camera in about 1963, took a lot of really mundane photographs that I still have in albums, but I'm too afraid to look at. And moved on and started taking some photographs in high school. I don't really remember why. I think it was because I worked for the high school newspaper, and from time to time they needed photographs. So I tried my hand at it and did a little of it here and there. Kind of dropped it, I guess, after a while. And then in college, I had the good fortune to study American Studies and Geography, which worked out great for me. I had been I went to a very good high school in Cincinnati. I was in the upper 55% of my graduating class, as they put it. So I was a pretty mediocre student, but I got into college and found there was a new way of looking at American history, and American Studies was the route to go. And I really liked that interdisciplinary approach. So I really sort of pursued that as much as I could. I wove photography into the curriculum wherever I could. And during the summers, I had a great opportunity. I was hired. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was hired to be to fill in for the chief photographer of the Minnesota Historical Society, who would take these long 6-week sojourns over to Europe, and I would fill in for him. And the woman I worked for, his husband, was the assistant attorney general for the state of Minnesota. And she came to me one day and she said, "What are you doing next week?" And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "I want you to go out to the state penitentiary for a couple of days." And I said, "To take photographs, right?" And she said, "Absolutely." So I went, and so one of my claims to fame is that I spent 2 days in the state pen in Minnesota, which is true. But when I was in college, I think there were a couple of books I came across that really sort of got me going. Although I didn't think it was a particularly good book photographically, or the way it was organized, at least. There was a book called In This Proud Land, which was the first grouping of Farm Security Administration photographs I'd ever seen from the Depression era by a man named Roy Stryker, who led the project during the 30s. And I know nothing about the FSA up to that point. And the second book was a book called Naives and Visionaries, which was a catalog. I don't like the title of it, but it was a catalog for the exhibition at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, which I happened to go and see when I was in college in St. Paul. And it was really got me interested for the first time in visionary artists and their environments. So although I had some experience as a photographer, I think I was so blown away by what other people were doing. I couldn't imagine doing it myself. So I basically chose eventually to learn as much as I could from them, to honor them for what they'd achieved, and not to try and play in their, not that I could have, but to even begin to think about playing in sandbox of their league. And I was intimidated. I was awestruck by, the scope and quality of their work. So I took maybe the easy route and became a curator of photographs, where I looked at other people's work, curated it, critiqued it, organized it, large collections instead. And it was a pretty rewarding career. I liked it pretty well. I did a big exhibition that Fred mentioned at ICP in New York with the Standard Oil photographs from the University of Louisville, and another book after that, which wasn't such a great experience, about the Pittsburgh so-called Renaissance in the early 50s. Other than that, as far as taking photographs myself, I really did the usual family and vacation thing. That was about it. So I think mostly out of economic necessity, I dropped out of the curatorial world in about 1985, went to work for this tremendously good printing company, which I think a lot of people thought I was crazy to do, but basically I learned a hell of a lot there, particularly about color management, working with other people, reproducing other people's books of photographs, which I did pretty often, and all kinds of business publications. But it really helped me later in my photographic work. I still wasn't taking photographs during the 80s, much into the 90s. By about 2005, though, my job required that I travel all over the place. And I got sick of sitting in hotel rooms and watching CNN every night or watching movies. And I decided I'd pack a camera. So I got a good camera, started carting it around, and really traveled. I've traveled, I think in that period, within the 10 years before that, probably to all this 50 states. And and also had the time and the luxury to get away. So I went to India for 3 weeks and photographed, Mexico, Peru, Chile, Cuba, different places in Europe. And that was very good for me because it was really liberating. Oftentimes, people are probably yelling at me not to take their picture, but I didn't know the language, so I just kept taking their picture. I didn't worry about anything. I just was out there roaming around from, sun up to sundown, photographing anything from, I don't know, the cremation ghats in Varanasi in India to the Taj Mahal and sort of everything in between. It was really a good time. I've tried to use, I really try not to look at these days at other people's photographs of particular places I'm interested in, at least before I've gone there, because I don't want to be influenced. I want to do my own thing. I don't want to imitate anybody. But the one thing I will say about the internet is it's a phenomenally good tool for finding people, finding their phone numbers, their email addresses. And Google Map is a godsend, because if I want to photograph a guy in Antonito, Colorado, named Cano Espinosa, who's a great character, the first thing I like to do is find his place on the map, look down at it, figure out what it looks like from the front, what's the best angle, and figure out what time of day to be there, because there's nothing worse than getting there at 4 p.m, photographing into the sun and trying to get a good picture of somebody. I guess ultimately, I really see myself primarily, as I said in I think in the material in the exhibition and the panel with it, I'm really sort of I see myself almost not as a photographer. A photographer's part is almost incidental to me. It's the way I record things, but I really see myself as being sort of this photographic hunter-gatherer. I like to collect photos of people and places. I've always had this sort of collecting mentality. I've spent so much time traveling around the country by car mostly, and by plane, but mostly by car. And I see so much out there, and I'm really reminded of this from the trip I had for 18 days recently. So much of the physical landscape in America is so dull, so repetitive, so filled with Cracker Barrels and Exxon stations and all the usual stuff. Not to say that that's bad, but there's an awful lot of it out there. And I really am a lot more interested in kind of getting away from that and seeking out this whole universe of people and places and artifacts they create. They're often marginalized people. They're often eccentric souls, but they're fascinating. And I love getting to know them, talking to them. I never take a camera out when I get there. I might have it slung around my neck in a bag, but that's the last thing I want to do. I really like to meet them. I like to talk to them. I like to find out what's on their mind and what they're seeing and why they do what they do. So it's really an honor to get to know them and be in a position to photograph them and their works. And I think these days, as much as anything, I feel a very deep sense of urgency to get out and photograph, the artists, visionary artists, their environments. Like me, they're up in years. I'm 67, 68, I guess, 67. And I see so much of what they create is made of found or discarded materials that don't hold up well in the environment. But I see these people going by the wayside, vanishing slowly but surely. Too many of them have left this earth in the last couple of decades. And as I grow older, I realize that time is really of the essence, which is a corny thing to say, but it really is true. And I really look forward to heading out again soon and continuing my work as long as I can do it. That's it. Lisa, did you want to put some photographs up?
Okay. So I had the impression that he was going to do a voiceover on some of his work now. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got 5 or 6 things I was going to just talk briefly about.
So, do you have them, Lisa?
I'm getting them right now.
She's getting
Oh, okay.
them up, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Thanks. All right. This is the first one. It's hard to summon the words to describe this person and this place, but this is a place outside of Marigold, Mississippi, in the heart of the Mississippi Delta, surrounded by cotton, soybeans, and not wheat, but cornfields. It was the sole proprietor was the gentleman you see there. His name is Willie Pole Monkey Seabury. His mother called him Poor Monkey because apparently he was a pretty active child, and he said she drove him nuts, or he drove her nuts rather. But this was his establishment. Unfortunately, he died in 2016 of a heart attack in his sleep. But he lived in this structure, which is an old tenement shack out on a plantation outside of town. From about 1954 on. So when he was about 13 years old, I believe. Yeah, 13. In 1963, he was a very enterprising guy, and he decided he wanted to make some money with it. So even though he and his brother lived in the back of it, they started a juke joint in this structure. It was a gathering place for local people. In those days, it probably would have been a totally African-American, almost totally African-American. But it was the one place they could go, in the era of Jim Crow, in that area where they could go hang out, have a great time, get to know each other, listen to music, talk about their problems, whatever the case may be. In the old days, it was open several nights a week. And the last few years, he was only open on Thursday nights, partly because it had become fairly popular. But in the old days, he would have had a live band or a musician of some sort, of blues musician playing there. And he really treated it like what it was. It was his home. He lived there. He lived in the back of it. If you look closely at the front of his overalls, he has a badge, which I think was like an honorary deputy sheriff badge. But he had rules, and it was his house. And if you came to his house, you were welcome to be there. He loved having you there. But he couldn't stand rap music. He couldn't stand hip hop. He didn't like kids coming in with their hats, on backwards, as you'll see on that sign where it says not like this and not like that. I think the not like that part with the pants down is an exaggeration, but pretty funny nonetheless. Didn't want any drugs. He didn't want any people bringing any loud music, no dope smoking, no rap music, and no beer brought inside. But once you got in there into his world, he was just phenomenal, incredibly friendly. I went there, I came in and announced, there were about 40 people packed into this tiny little place. The music's thumping away. There's probably 1,000 stuffed monkeys hanging from the ceiling. And I just remember he said, I want you to feel welcome. I want you to feel at home. And he would take me around and introduce me to some people. And then pretty soon I saw him across the room, and he's talking to these 2 African-American women. They were probably about my age. It looked like they were just out for a night having fun, drinking some beer. And he was pointing at me, and they were kind of laughing and snickering. And pretty soon one of them came over and said, "Willie says you want to go on a date with us." So he would do things like that. He would just, he liked to cause some mayhem and some trouble, and he was good at it. He would strap on appendages, which I won't go into more detail about, and come out of the back room with a red suit on and a big red derby hat and jump around and do all kinds of crazy stuff and dance. He put on wigs. He did all kinds of things. He was a wonderful guy. And unfortunately, he died 5 years ago this summer in July. But toward the end, it was interesting because it seemed like a third of the people there were probably from Denmark, Holland, Belgium, France, Germany. And he attracted a pretty surprisingly international audience, but the locals kept coming there. And I mean, ultimately, in the end, when I think about what the world has become like, or our countries like these days, and all the issues we have with race relations and social problems, it was a place where everybody could go chill out, and everybody got along, and everybody was interested in each other and had a good time. And it was a wonderful place, and it's just too bad it's gone. Can you have the next picture, please?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to change it. It's giving me a trouble here.
No problem. This is Willie. This is my favorite picture I took of him. The place is about 98 degrees, middle of the summer. He has big air pointing at him, this big fan that was spinning around. You can see just some of the stuff that was, taped on, nailed on to the walls. The nice old plywood dance floor. And I like this just because he's got his wig on, he's in his element, one of his wigs on, and he's just kind of taking it all in and really enjoying having all these people come into what essentially was his house. Next picture. This is a couple I was just sitting across the table from. Sometimes I would ask if I could take their photographs. I think in this case I did. A lot of times it was kind of reminded me of being in India, where we have 1 billion people. And sometimes when you try and take someone's photograph, they don't like it, and they'll get in your face and let you know it. But 9 times out of 10, they look at you as this Westerner, this outsider, and like, God, he's interested in taking a picture of me. There must be some reason, let him do it. So they were very nice, very accommodating that way. I like the little picture on the left-hand side of that was taped on the wall of B.B. King kind of looking over their shoulder at him, just coincidentally. But they were just sweet, really nice people, and I enjoyed hanging out with them. Next picture. These are 4 women. One of them, the one in the center at the top, I had met before, really nice. Lived within about a 15 or 20 mile radius of this place. They were pretty frequent guests there. But they, at this point, had probably had a few beers and a few cigarettes, and they were very friendly, really nice, a lot of fun to hang around and play around with. Next picture, please. This is entirely, well, again, in the South, but in Seal, Alabama, which is about 20 miles southwest of Columbus, Georgia, which is 100 miles southwest of Atlanta, if you know where that is. And this is Butch Anthony, who has become a really good friend to me. He's all kinds of things. He's an artist, a farmer. He's a really good paleontologist. He's a curator. He's a great mechanic. And he also was an auctioneer until recently. He collects stuff. He collects all kinds of stuff. The car, for example.
Pretty fucking wet out there.
What's that? Oh, sorry. The white Cadillac you see there is a 1989 white Cadillac, previously owned solely by Leon Russell, who just happens to be one of my favorite musicians. And he had arranged to trade, Butch had traded some of his paintings, which he does, to Leon Russell for his car. So he picked up this car and promptly started to convert it into an art car. So there's all kinds of trophies all over it. And the greatest hood ornament of all time, which is a deer head that you see there with all kinds of trophies attached to the antlers. I had the privilege of driving this thing a couple of times. It was quite fun. It does draw people's attention. The building in the back is in a location about a mile from where Butch lives. And he had so many people coming to look at his collections in his museum at his farm a mile away that he bought this land and bought these 4 containers and constructed this thing called the Drive-Through Museum of Wonder, which he claimed was the only museum in the United States open during the pandemic, which might be a little bit of a stretch, but it was open 24 hours a day and anybody could drive through. And he's got amazing stuff, dinosaur bones. He's got some of his paintings. There's a little self-promotion there, but he also has a stone about the size of a lemon, I would say. And you look at it and you read the description, it turns out it's supposedly the world's largest gallstone removed from a human being, taken from a woman in Alabama. And I asked him one time what he had to pay for that, because it must be really valuable. And he sort of hesitated and said, well, I overpaid. And I said, what did you pay? And he goes, like $15. And I said, well, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. And he said, well, I should have paid 10 or 11. So he's a really good, he's a sort of a trader as well. But he's, these days, I photograph him pretty as often as I can. I've worked on him. I've sort of helped him edit a book about his work that's coming out this month, which has been an interesting experience. And I stay at his farm and pretty often. And I've met some really interesting people there and had some really good times. So next picture, please. This person, I believe, is on our call. And I'm happy to see him. This is Clark Bedford in, got a little thing here written about him. Well, this is Clark Bedford in Hyattsville, Maryland. I think I took this photograph last October, or maybe it's Clark, it was either October or December. And I've been back and pestered Clark 2 or 3 times. And I think the reason I did it was because I'd go and I'd come home and I'd look at the pictures and I was pretty happy with them. You know, they were okay, they were good. But what I realized over time was it's really hard to capture the detail and it's not an enormous place, but there's an enormous amount of stuff in the place. And it's so hard to capture that. So I went back this time and I think I did a little better. I don't know if I'm gonna have to bug him anymore and keep photographing him if you're on, Clark, but I wanted to capture the detail and I wanted to capture him in the middle of it. And I knew if he was back by his front door, where you see the little Mona Lisa in the background, that might not be so good because he'd sort of be lost in the shuffle. So I wanted you to be able to see him, but at the same time see at least, let's see, you can really see 3 of the 5 or so vehicles he has there and a good part of his front yard. You can't possibly get the backyard at the same time, which is a whole nother world. And his house is amazing. He was, there was an article I read about him recently in the Washington Post. It was from 3 or 4 years ago. His house was built in 1914. They described it as being art encrusted, which I thought was a really good term. He was a former conservator. He studied science originally in college, came out as an art major. His place is just, I don't know, it's a jewel. It's just amazing artistry. It might be my favorite of all these places I've been to, but it's way up on my list for sure. It's just made up of just thousands of these small objects fastened to his house, to his vehicles, and scattered throughout his yard. But it's all so artfully done and so beautifully composed. I am running out of words to describe it, but it's just a phenomenal place. And he was, I just want to point out that he was awarded, Clark was awarded I think it was the best appearing individual award in Hyattsville, Maryland in 2018, which is a title I thought was great. Next one, please. This is Dimitro, I'm gonna say his name wrong, Sislak, in Hamtramck, Michigan, which is the most densely populated area in Michigan, or city in Michigan. It's 2 square miles. It was a Polish enclave, totally Polish enclave practically. Although in recent years, a lot of Bangladeshis and Yemenis have been moving in. This picture was taken in 2014, about a year before, unfortunately, before Dimitro died. he was another really interesting character. He started this thing called the Hamtramck Disneyland. You can see it. He has it titled America Disneyland, but it's his personal Disneyland in his backyard in an area that was roughly 30 feet wide and maybe 40 feet deep, crammed to the gills with all kinds of found stuff he built, a helicopter, an airplane, missiles, soldiers, you name it, you'll probably find it somewhere in the backyard. Of course, there's a couple of obligatory Elvis pictures, but he was, when I went there, he was definitely up in years. He had, he pretty much stopped working on it. He really built the majority of it between 92 and 99. He said he did it basically to relieve the boredom of retirement. He'd been an assembly line worker who had emigrated from in the 50s from the Ukraine. And he started doing this. And when I was there that particular day, it was one of the rare, really nice days in March or April in Detroit. And he somehow convinced me, like an idiot that I was at the time, to get on, take a ladder for him and go up on top of the garage. So I was up on the garage right before this, and I planted my foot in one place, and my foot started to go through the roof. Somehow I was able to stop before I got too much momentum and went through the whole thing, because that would have been a catastrophe. I mostly would have been mad because I had destroyed his incredible property. But he was, his English was pretty limited. Unfortunately, he died about a year after this. There's a small group that bought his property for $100,000. There's a house kind of to the right behind us where he lived, and they get some income from the apartments in it. They're trying to keep it up, but I've been back a couple times, and like so many of these, or practically all of these places, unless the Kohler Foundation steps in and funds a massive preservation project, which is wonderful when they do, they tend to slip away. The pieces get picked off, they rot in the sun and the snow and the rain. There's no one to take care of it the way the original person with the original vision could do it. So it's really unfortunate. And I know, Fred, you see this all the time, where I can think of in the last 5 years, 3 or 4 key people I'll describe as visionary artists who've died. And, it's a big problem, can be a big problem if you're really interested in preserving it, what they've done. And to me, they're almost always well worth preserving.
Yeah, if I could interrupt for just a second. Most people, almost anybody in this field, and whether photographers or whatever, will tell you the same thing, that you're always running and running and running to try to stay one step ahead of the Grim Reaper. You feel like it's just a constant thing. Honestly, it's like you find out about somebody and the first thing is, okay, I got to get there because they or it may not be there, 2 years from now or even a year from now or whatever. So it's a constant race. It's a constant foot race with the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
So sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Interject a little happy thought there. So.
Well, unfortunately, it's really true. And there have been a number of places that have been preserved. Sometimes the family can do it. It's a real struggle. And when it's done, when the Kohler Foundation steps in, and they've done some amazingly good work. They're doing M.T. Liggett's place out in Kansas right now. And they're doing it, I think, in a way that's really good. They're not trying to make it look like he just painted all this stuff in the last week. They make it look like it's been out in the sun, as it has in Kansas for a long time. So they're doing it in a nice way, in the right way, I should say, and trying to preserve what they can. But there's probably a really long line of people that would like to get them in to save their work, but it's a finite group of funds, I suppose, and they can't do everything for everybody all the time. And it'd be interesting to sit in on a meeting there and figure out how they decide which projects to take and which ones not to take. It could be tough. The hardest thing about all this, I've got one more. Yeah, you can go ahead to that. Thanks. I think the hardest thing here is, I've got, I don't know how many pictures. It's mind-boggling, maybe, of this stuff from this exhibit, 20, 30, 40,000. They're all digital, which is great, but trying to narrow it down to 65 and then 5 to talk about here is kind of it's absurd, but it's fun to do. But I didn't want to leave out Jim Phillips. Jim Phillips in this picture is known as the Antler Man. He lives out in Three Forks, Montana, and he has spent the last 60 years, as you can probably tell in this picture, scouring Montana looking for antlers. And he's never bought a set. He's never shot an animal or hunted an animal to get a set. People bring him stuff, but he basically goes out and gets his stuff himself. And he's been known also to find people who have gutted deer and then thrown the antlers into dumpsters. So he does some dumpster diving. He picks up a little bit that way. But he was a plant manager at a place nearby, near Three Forks. Most of the antlers are elk and deer, though he has a few buffalo and some moose that are pretty impressive too. But he started collecting this material when he was 10 years old, and he's been doing it now. He's about 70 years old, and he's done pretty well, I think, in life. And he's built this 30 by 60 foot shed, all lit up, and he has, nobody really knows, I think, but he'll tell you between 16 and 17,000 pairs of antlers hung up all over the walls, the ceilings, almost on everywhere but the floors pretty much. He would have had another 2,100 sets, but he sold those off and made enough money doing it to put his 3 daughters each through 4 years of college, which I thought was impressive. And he really is, he's grown the collection organically. He finds this stuff on his own. He'll go out and there's one instance he mentions where he hiked 26 miles and found absolutely nothing one day. And then not too long after that, he found 87 pairs in one day, enough to fill up a trailer or the back of a pickup truck easily. So it's kind of an up or down, hit or miss thing, but it's an amazing place. And when I photographed him, he was a little reluctant to be in the picture. A lot of times people are like, well, why would you want me in the picture? And I always want to tell him, well, as interested as I am in what you do, I'm equally, if not more, interested in you. And you're the person that created this environment, and I'd like to see you in the middle of it if you don't mind, but you don't have to do it. So I tried to get him. It was a little hard because of the light, but I had to use a tripod. But I got him far enough back that it probably exaggerates a little bit the antlers in proportion to Jim Phillips. But if you could see the whole building inside, this is just about not even a third of it probably. So it was hard to do, but it reminded me a little bit of working at Clark's place, where you've got so much stuff and you want to show all of it, but it's difficult to do. Any questions about any of these photographs? Or
I'll just chime in for a second here. Jim Phillips also takes, I think, daily pretty long nature walks, and he has a journal. He writes stories about little, well, not really story, not fiction, but sometimes it's just what his experiences while he's on his little trips or walking trips or things that go through his mind. And it's actually, he's got 2 volumes, I think, of them. And they're not super well written, and he's the first one to say that, but the content of them is really very nice. He goes back in history and he thinks about things when he was a kid and all this kind of free association stuff that he goes through while he's walking. So
yeah, he's
on PBS. A couple of people have done little documentaries on him and his writings.
Mm-hmm. There are several artists who have written some pretty interesting books. There's a guy, Billy Tripp, in Brownsville, Tennessee, who's written, I think, 4 books, and he gave me one when I was there one time. He has this place called the Minefield, which is incredible, and made of steel. And he handed me the book and he said, well, I hope you enjoy it, but he said, I got to tell you one thing. I said, what? And he goes, I don't really understand punctuation. And when I read the book, I could see what he meant, but it's still it's an interesting book, and they're big, thick volumes. I think there are 4 of them now. Any other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to say something. My computer's like at 2%, so I got to make it last. I was just really touched by the way you relate with people and how you take photos of them. Because I've been doing photography like as just kind of like a hobby thing for the last 5 years, and you reminded me of a lot of people that I've taken pictures of and gotten their stories, and really made me appreciate and think about photography in a different way versus what I used to. I mean, I think one story that I wanted to bring up was I was at the beach at Smith Point in Long Island, and it was like a rainy day, cloudy, whatever. But there was this older man, and he had his, Army World War II cap on, and he was looking out over the water. And I had my camera, so I was doing some photos. And like I don't normally take pictures of people. I feel weird. I'm always like, do I want a candid shot? But if I'm taking a candid shot now, I'm like, I don't know if I'm offending them. But either way, I sparked a conversation with him, and he was looking out, and he was like, that plane crash that crashed here, and like, I don't know, it was maybe like 40s or 50s, I forget when, but there was a plane crash at the site. There's a memorial there, and he was like, he told me that he was there that day when it happened. He saw the plane go in, and I was like, I mean, I was astounded. I mean, I came into this just seeing this guy looking out, and he was there when, this plane crash. And this is a place where I've gone to my entire childhood. So to meet somebody who was there when that had actually happened was amazing. So after that, I was like, can I take a photo of you? And he was, I mean, his face blew up he was so happy that I would even want to take a photo of him.
Well, thanks. I think one of the things, when I was doing the Farm Security Administration show, I met Russell Lee, who was one of the photographers. And one of the things I learned just from observing him, I guess, was, and hearing about what he did and where he went and how he did it, was the importance of coming in someplace or coming in to meet somebody, and just, you don't want to be like TV news. You want to come in, you've got to be genuine somehow. You've got to be comfortable. They've got to be comfortable, or it doesn't work very well. And it's hard, I think, when you're by yourself and you're taking photographs, because I'm sitting there thinking, my God, the light's horrible. How am I going to do this? What settings should I have on the lens? And at the same time, I really want to hear what they have to say. And I see Clark here. I mean, some of the most enjoyable conversations I've had have been sitting in his living room with him. And I remember sitting there the first time and a squirrel wandered in, and it was pretty funny. But just to be able to, I mean, it's a measure of respect in a lot of ways, but I think the end results are so much better if people are comfortable. And, if they don't, at the same time, you're there to do something, and that's take photographs, and you don't want to leave empty handed. But sometimes it's better if you just come back to the second time or third time, and sometimes it just doesn't work and you move on, but you can't be too shy or too reluctant to try. And that's cost me dearly. For 20 years, I was too intimidated, so blown away by what I saw other people that I said, I don't think I could do that. I'm not even going to try it. I'll look at other people's pictures and admire them and enjoy them. I don't really regret that, but I wish I'd taken a few more pictures along the way too.
Question. Is there a catalog?
Well, there's a self-published blurb book, which I did. The great thing about blurb is you can, in 5 days, you can get a pretty nicely reproduced 140-page book delivered to your doorstep of your own making. That's wonderful. The downside is it costs $182. So if you're interested, you can go on. We'll have a slide here in a second. You can get it on Blurb. I would wait a couple of weeks, because I'm having a big fight with them about color reproduction and what they've sent me so far, and I want to fix that. But if you're really motivated to do that's really nice. But I would wait until they have a 30 or 40% off coupon or sale or promo code. So, and get it cheap.
Right. Keep me posted of that.
I will. Yeah. Don't jump until I tell you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry about that, guys. I had to run inside, but
No problem.
yeah. Oh, but if you don't mind, I just want to finish. I mean, that was a great experience I had with taking a photo of someone, but there was another time I was staying in Boston with a friend, and in the morning I woke up early to do some photos because I was kind of curious about, what was, happening due to COVID, stores closing, things around, whatever, So I went from I was following this string of single, vodka things you would buy from somewhere. And then when I found one, and then I found another one, and it was I think after 7 or 8 photos, by the time I got to the end of it, I found a whole horde of it was a 6-pack or something. And I thought it was the first time I ever I don't know, it was I was tracing an animal in the wilderness, but I was tracing the debauchery of, I think, a homeless person, which was really interesting. But then I transitioned and I was walking past a bus stop and I saw this woman, and she was older, and she just I don't know, there's something about her that really made me want to take a picture of her. I thought she had a lot of character, but she was very adamant about me not taking a picture of her. She was like, no. And then I was like, well, I mean, I'm just an artist, don't worry. I don't really show my photos to anyone anyway. So, but then she was clearly not about it. But my question is, I mean, you said earlier, you ask people sometimes, and if they say no, do you always not take the picture?
Almost always I wouldn't. It would be hard for me to do it. If they're that adamant about it, it isn't meant to be, I guess. So it's a kind of a two-way street.
Yeah.
But then, the downside of not doing it candidly is that, there are a lot of people pose and, they give you the thumbs up sign or, whatever they do, which is irritating too. So
yeah, it reminds me
of depends.
Yeah, my car got messed up when I was going on a hike upstate, and my car broke down. Well, actually no, I just needed a battery boost, but this German dude who was just around the corner, at the gas station, he was like, oh, don't worry, I'll help you. And I didn't have anything long enough to attach our batteries, so he was a mechanic, so he brought us back to his compound or whatever, because he had to create his own compound because he had to close his store because of COVID. So now he was doing all of his car repair stuff here. But after the experience, I wanted to take a photo of him, and he was glad to, but he did do the thumbs up and stuff. And I was like, it's great, but I mean, having a candid shot of him, I think, would have been better. But
yeah,
curious your take on that.
Yeah, it's got a lot of it. It's just gut reaction, doing what you think is right at the spur of the moment. And
yeah,
I just got a text from just quickly. I got a text from my nephew who's on the call with us, who traveled with us one time when we were in England, and where I took some vacation pictures of Stonehenge. And he says, I was surprised that you called 10,000 photos of Stonehenge just the usual family and vacation photos. He had to suffer through a couple of weeks of it. So sorry, Spencer.
So we got a question there in chat from Lisa. Steve, what are your plans for summer 21?
Let's see. There's a guy that I just found out about recently who built a small vacation house in Eastern Washington, right on the Columbia River, that looks almost exactly like a replica of the lunar landing module. And he lives in Seattle. He's a catamaran designer and architect, sailboat guy. And I'm trying to line him up and get out there and see him in July or August. And then from there, I'll go to Portland, and I have a friend who owns a 727, which he had disassembled, moved into the woods, and he lives in it. He's a very unusual guy. He calls it the airplane home. And I take a lot of this. Sometimes, I want to go back, and I photographed him twice already, but I'm not happy with what I've got. He's pretty patient, so let me come back maybe one more time, take another stab at it. And this time I try not to have preconceived notions of what I want to do, but this time I know what I did wrong and how to do it right, I hope. So I'll try it. Other than that, going to Japan maybe in the fall.
Okay, and Lisa also asked you to talk about Eddie Adams, the poster boy.
Yeah, real quickly, Ernie is 80 years old, lives in Maricopa, Arizona, and is an incredibly gifted mechanic and metal artist.
Yeah.
He builds cars from hand. The one you see there is a replica of a Mercury, I think a 1951 Mercury. He does use some, he basically pulls mechanical parts like the engine, the transmission, basically, and not much else out of existing cars. So this car is about roughly 60% of the size of a real car. So he's not 7'8". He's basically my height, 6 feet tall, and he still towers over this car, but it's drivable. He's driven this in Nebraska, where he's from, but he makes all of those rounded metal objects. And of course, when you buy a car from Detroit, they just pound this stuff out. Once they get a die, they pound all the pieces out on giant presses. He takes a flat piece of steel and hammers it on a machine called an English wheel, gets the shapes, gets it chromed, did the dash, the bumpers, the wheels, the interior. It's pretty amazing stuff. He spends about on average 4,500 hours on a car. He's been offered $400,000 or $500,000 for that one. He won't take it, but he has a little museum, and he's a really nice guy, very entertaining, a lot of fun to hang around with. Well worth a visit if you're in Maricopa, Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting close here. I just wanted to pick up on Steve's thing about meeting the people. And I have to say that pursuing this kind of work has just broadened my experience of tremendous variety of people. I know Steve says, I'm speaking for everybody who does this kind of work. And I can't even imagine, I'd be a different person leading a completely different life if I hadn't pursued this photography and the project that happened to bring me to all these different crazy people, except for Clark Bedford, of course, is completely rational. All the rest of them are, and I say, I don't really mean crazy, of course, but just a tremendous variety of people. And I think that part of it is just tremendously satisfying. Like the photography aside, in a way, like Steve said, he almost doesn't think himself primarily as being interested in photography, it's the people. And I can't even imagine, I have a feeling Steve feels the same way, but I can't even imagine my life if I hadn't met all these people, become part of this sort of big family of people. And then they do tend to die a lot too. Because it tends to be a very older, skewed demographic, as we were saying before. But it's just been, photography's just been this great, almost accidental introduction to a whole nother world, or many other worlds. So.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, we're almost done here. Lisa, would Bill Carner have any comments on the work?
Oh, I'm blown away. I wish I'd been there. I mean, you get to meet these people. I mean, I'd carry your bag just to go with you. And
Oh, anytime. Be careful what you wish for.
Right. And I don't know, but the one thing about the guy giving you the thumbs up,
Yeah.
take that picture and then take another one.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait for you to
Yeah.
relax. Take another one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there are times I think when you get so preoccupied with what you just saw and you don't like, you put your camera down and say, well, that's what I'm stuck with.
Okay, so we're really, really close here. I had a little poll quote here of Bill's ready when I thought I was going to be doing a slight introduction. So maybe this is a perfect way to end. I hope he doesn't mind this one. You can say things like tone, composition, print quality, or how your eyes move through it, which is what we spend almost all of our time doing in classes. You should see what the photographer wants you to see. Okay, that's sort of the stock approach. But there's also got to be heart. There are photographs that are heartless, which are interesting, but it's the ones that have a little heart that I really like. Bill Carner on what makes a good photograph. So I thought you said that.
Allegedly.
When?
I don't know. Well, you're reputed to have said that. Let's put it that way.
Okay, right. The memory fails, I'm saying, I'm getting up in years. Well,
Okay.
sounded kind of.
But anyway, I just thought it was kind of great because
Yeah, it's
in
cool.
academia, we sort of concentrate on the academic things in the bad sense of that word. And then this is sort of like saying, but you got to get the shot, like ultimately all of that kind of stuff is a little self-congratulatory if you don't get the content, don't get the emotional meaning to it. So on that note, we're right on 6:30 and I happen to have a class that started at 6 o'clock. So you guys can stay forever, but I probably should go. So if we could go back to, so thanks to everyone, and we'd bring Lisa back to just briefly here.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming tonight.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, man.
And this will be recorded. It is being recorded and it'll be up by next Wednesday. And we have one of these every Wednesday, and hope to see you again soon. And thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your work with us tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for being there.
Thanks, man.